What if I told you that the human body is capable of things so extraordinary, so far beyond what modern science considers possible, that even the world's most brilliant doctors and researchers are left completely speechless? We live in an age where medicine has mapped the human genome, performed face transplants, and sent robots into operating rooms to perform surgery with microscopic precision. We think we know the human body inside and out. We think we have seen everything. But every once in a while, a real person comes along who shatters every assumption, defies every known limit, and leaves the entire medical community scrambling for answers with their mouths hanging open. These are not myths. These are not ancient legends passed down around a fire. These are verified, documented, peer-reviewed, real-world cases that even the most qualified doctors on the planet cannot explain. So sit down, turn up the volume, and pay close attention, because what you are about to hear is going to permanently change the way you think about what it means to be human. Let's start with something that will immediately destroy everything you thought you knew about the limits of human survival. In January of 1980, a young woman named Jean Hilliard from Lengby, Minnesota, was driving home late at night when her car skidded off the road in brutally cold temperatures. She tried to walk to a nearby friend's house for help, but she collapsed in the snow just 15 feet from the front door and lay there for 6 hours in temperatures of negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit. When her friend discovered her the next morning, Jean was not just unconscious. She was frozen solid. Her skin was so hard that paramedics said it felt like touching a piece of wood. A hypodermic needle actually bent when they tried to pierce her skin to insert an IV. Her eyes were completely fixed, glassy, and unresponsive to light. Her face was a pale, waxy, bluish gray. Her body temperature had dropped so far below normal that the hospital's standard thermometers could not even produce a reading. The attending physician, Dr. George Sather, stated that her face was absolutely solid and he could not get a pulse or any sign of life whatsoever. By every single medical standard that exists, Jean Hilliard was dead. And yet, over the next several hours, as her body slowly warmed, something impossible began to happen. She started moving. She began to speak. She regained consciousness. And within weeks, she made a near-complete recovery with almost no permanent damage to her organs, her brain, or her extremities. The physicians who treated her openly admitted they had no medical explanation for what they witnessed. Here is why this is so scientifically disturbing. When human tissue freezes, the water inside individual cells turns into ice crystals. Those crystals have jagged edges that physically puncture and rupture the cell membrane, causing permanent, irreversible destruction. That is not a theory. That is established cellular biology. Frozen human tissue does not recover. Frozen human tissue dies, and yet every cell in Jean Hilliard's body survived intact. To this day, not a single published medical paper has produced a satisfying explanation for how that was possible. Now let's talk about a man who single-handedly forced the entire scientific establishment to rewrite a rule they considered absolute. Wim Hof, a Dutch extreme athlete known across the world as the Iceman, holds over 24 verified world records involving extreme cold exposure. He has sat submerged in ice water for nearly 2 hours, run full marathons barefoot across Arctic snow in temperatures that would kill an unprotected person within minutes, and climbed to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro wearing nothing but shorts and shoes. These feats alone are staggering. But the moment that truly detonated a bomb inside the scientific community had nothing to do with cold. It happened inside a sterile, controlled hospital laboratory. Researchers injected Wim Hof with a bacterial endotoxin, a substance derived from dead E. coli bacteria that in 100% of healthy adults triggers a powerful and unavoidable immune response. We are talking fever, violent shivering, crushing headache, vomiting, and nausea. Medical science classified this reaction as completely and irrevocably involuntary. Your conscious mind has absolutely no access to it. You cannot breathe your way out of it, think your way out of it, or meditate your way out of it. That was settled science. That was medical fact. Except Wim Hof sat there, used a specific breathing and meditation technique he had developed, and produced almost no immune response at all. His inflammatory markers barely moved. The researchers were so shaken that they refused to accept the result and immediately designed a controlled replication. They took 12 people Wim Hof had personally trained in his method, and 12 untrained control subjects, and injected all of them with the same endotoxin. Every single trained individual showed dramatically and measurably suppressed immune responses. Every single control subject responded normally with full symptoms. The results were published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2014, one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world. The conclusion was unavoidable. A process that medical science had declared completely involuntary for over a century could be consciously controlled. The precise physiological mechanism behind how this is possible remains an active and genuinely unresolved scientific debate to this very day. But if controlling your own immune system sounds extraordinary, then what do you make of a man who went an entire year and then some without eating a single bite of food and lived to tell about it in perfect health? Angus Barbieri was a 27-year-old man from Tayport, Scotland, who in 1965 weighed 456 pounds and decided to do something about it. Under close medical supervision by doctors at the University of Dundee, he began a therapeutic fast. What was supposed to last a few weeks extended to a few months, and then it kept going. Angus Barbieri consumed absolutely no solid food whatsoever for 382 consecutive days. That is 1 year, 17 days, and approximately 16 hours of total fasting. He survived on water, black coffee, tea, and vitamin and mineral supplements prescribed by his medical team. Throughout the entire process, his doctors monitored him with regular blood tests, physical examinations, and clinical assessments. His blood sugar remained stable. His potassium levels were maintained. His cognition stayed sharp and clear. He reported feeling, in his own words, quite well. He lost 276 pounds and at the end of the fast weighed 180 pounds. His case was formally written up and published in the Postgraduate Medical Journal in 1973, where it remains one of the most extraordinary case studies in the history of clinical nutrition. What continues to baffle modern dietitians, endocrinologists, and metabolism researchers is not simply that he survived. Starvation physiology is reasonably well understood up to a point. What baffles them is the degree of his metabolic adaptation, the stability of his organ function over such an extended period, and the fact that his body found ways to sustain itself that go significantly beyond what current nutritional science can fully model or predict. The case is simultaneously a landmark and an unsolved mystery. Now here is a case that will make you question something even more fundamental: the very minimum amount of brain required for a human being to live a normal life. In 2007, a 44-year-old civil servant in France went to see a doctor complaining of nothing more alarming than mild weakness in his left leg. It was a routine visit. The doctor ordered a routine brain MRI, expecting to find nothing remarkable. What appeared on the screen stopped everyone in the room cold. The man's skull was almost entirely filled with cerebrospinal fluid. His brain, the organ responsible for every thought, every memory, every movement, every emotion he had ever had been slowly compressed over the course of his entire life by an untreated buildup of fluid, a condition called hydrocephalus, until it existed as nothing more than a thin sheet of tissue lining the inner edges of his skull. Neurologists who reviewed the scans estimated that his functional brain tissue represented somewhere between 5 and 10% of what is considered normal. By every principle of modern neuroscience, this man should not have been able to walk, speak, or think. He should have been in a vegetative state at best. Instead, he was a married man. He had 2 children. He held a steady civil service job. He had an IQ of 75, below average, yes, but well within the range of normal daily functioning. The case was published in The Lancet and immediately triggered a scientific crisis, because if a human being can live a completely functional life with a fraction of the brain tissue that neuroscience says is required for basic consciousness and cognition, then the foundational models of how the brain works are missing something enormous. This case has never been satisfactorily explained. Let's now meet the man who may have had the most extraordinary human memory in the documented history of our species. Kim Peek was born in Salt Lake City, Utah, in 1951 and came into the world with a brain that was structurally unlike any other. He was born without a corpus callosum, the dense cable of approximately 250 million nerve fibers that connects the brain's left and right hemispheres and allows them to share information. He also had abnormalities in several other brain regions. In virtually every other recorded case, the absence of the corpus callosum produces severe intellectual disability and profound developmental challenges. In Kim Peek, it produced something that neuroscientists still cannot categorize or explain. He could hold a book open and read both pages simultaneously, his left eye reading the left page and his right eye reading the right page, and he retained every word of both pages permanently in his memory. He read at roughly 10 seconds per page. By the time of his death in December of 2009, he had personally read and memorized the complete contents of over 12,000 books. He had memorized every road, every highway, every zip code, and every area code in the United States. He could tell you what day of the week any date in history fell on, calculated in seconds, and also tell you what major historical events occurred on that day. He remembered every piece of classical music he had ever heard and could identify the date of composition, the composer's biography, and the names of every musician who had performed notable recordings of that piece. NASA scientists studied his brain before his death and described his neural architecture as something entirely outside the boundaries of known human neuroscience. The mechanism behind his memory has never been explained. Now let's talk about someone who was the living, breathing, documented proof that the human body can survive something that should produce instant and catastrophic death. In September of 1848, a 25-year-old railroad construction foreman named Phineas Gage was working in Cavendish, Vermont, when a premature explosion drove a tamping iron, an iron rod 13 pounds in weight, 3 feet 7 inches in length, and over an inch in diameter, completely through his skull. The rod entered below his left cheekbone, passed directly through the front of his brain, and exited through the top of his skull, landing several feet away. Phineas Gage was conscious within minutes of the accident. He was sitting upright and speaking coherently by the time a cart arrived to take him to a doctor. He walked up a flight of stairs to reach the physician's office. He lived for another 12 years and died of causes unrelated to the injury. Neurologists and neurosurgeons who have studied his case using modern reconstruction techniques are deeply divided on how his brain sustained that specific trajectory of damage without killing him instantly. The rod passed through regions associated with decision-making and personality, and survivors who knew him before and after the accident reported dramatic personality changes. But his survival of the immediate trauma defies standard clinical expectations for penetrating brain injuries of that type and magnitude. His preserved skull and the original tamping iron are still on display at Harvard Medical School's Warren Anatomical Museum, and his case is still actively debated in neuroscience literature today. There is also the world of extreme physical endurance, where one man has pushed so far beyond the documented physiological limits of the human body that sports scientists have openly questioned whether the standard models of human performance even apply to him. Dean Karnazes is an American ultramarathon runner who, in October of 2005, ran 350 continuous miles across Northern California over 80 hours and 44 minutes, stopping for nothing except brief pauses for food and to change shoes, without sleeping once. He once ran 50 marathons in 50 consecutive days across all 50 American states. He has run to the South Pole in temperatures of -40 degrees. What makes Karnazes uniquely fascinating from a purely medical standpoint is a physiological characteristic that researchers at a university laboratory discovered when they tested him on a treadmill. His muscles clear lactic acid so rapidly and so efficiently that he was essentially unable to reach the lactate threshold, the point at which lactic acid accumulates faster than the body can remove it, causing the burning sensation and eventual muscular shutdown that stops every other athlete on Earth. They kept increasing the speed. His lactate levels stayed controlled. He also demonstrated mitochondrial efficiency and resistance to oxidative cellular damage at levels that current exercise physiology cannot fully account for with any identified genetic variant. Scientists who have studied him have stated that his body appears to be operating under a different set of physiological rules than the rest of the human population, and those rules have not yet been written down. The oldest verified human being in all of recorded history also presents one of the deepest and most enduring puzzles in the science of aging. Jean-Louise Calment was born in Arles, France, on February 21, 1875, and she died on August 4, 1997, at the confirmed and thoroughly verified age of 122 years and 164 days. No other human being in history whose age has been rigorously documented has come close to this figure. Gerontologists have accepted her record without serious dispute, but here's what makes Jeanne Calment not just a record holder but a genuine scientific mystery. She began smoking cigarettes at the age of 21 and continued smoking until she was 117 years old, when she quit, not because of health concerns, but because her failing eyesight made it difficult for her to light the cigarettes herself. She ate a diet rich in chocolate, consuming nearly 2 pounds of it per week throughout much of her life. She drank port wine regularly. She did not exercise obsessively. She had no extraordinary health regimen. She experienced profound personal losses, including the deaths of her husband, her daughter, and her grandson, all of whom died before her. Researchers have identified certain genetic polymorphisms in her DNA that may be associated with longevity, but no existing model of aging, genetic, epigenetic, behavioral, or environmental, can account for why her telomeres, her cellular repair mechanisms, her cardiovascular system, and her immune function aged at the dramatically reduced rate that allowed her to outlive virtually every other person born in the same century by decades. She remains the ultimate biological outlier, and the true mechanism behind her lifespan is genuinely, completely, and humbly unsolved. Finally, let's close with a man whose existence suggests that the human brain is capable of experiencing and processing reality in ways that neuroscience has not yet begun to adequately map or explain. Daniel Tammet was born in London, England in 1979. He is a high-functioning autistic savant who holds the European record for reciting the mathematical constant pi entirely from memory. He recited it to 22,514 decimal places in a continuous session lasting 5 hours and 9 minutes in March of 2004, a feat that required months of preparation and was witnessed and verified by officials and observers. He is also a remarkable linguist who can achieve functional conversational fluency in a new language within a single week. In 2007, to demonstrate this on camera, he learned Icelandic, a language so complex and archaic in its grammar that it routinely takes native English speakers years to reach basic competence, in 7 days, after which he sat for a live television interview conducted entirely in Icelandic on national Icelandic television. He passed with ease. But what makes Daniel Tammet the most intellectually haunting case in this entire video is not the records themselves. It is his ability to describe, in clear and articulate language, exactly how he does what he does. He does not memorize numbers sequentially the way a computer stores data. He experiences each number as a unique, vivid, multisensory object, a specific shape, a specific color, a specific texture, and a specific emotional feeling. The number 1 feels to him like a flash of white light. The number 37 feels jagged and lumpy like porridge. The number 89 feels like falling snow. When he multiplies 2 large numbers together, he does not perform a calculation. He places the 2 number shapes beside each other in his mind and perceives a third shape emerging between them. And that third shape is the answer. For neuroscientists, this account raises questions so fundamental that they barely know where to start. How does a brain encode abstract mathematical relationships as concrete sensory experiences? How does that sensory perception reliably produce mathematically correct results? What does this tell us about the true nature of numerical cognition and the range of architectural possibilities that the human brain may be capable of implementing? No one knows. And that may be the most remarkable thing of all. The human body is not the finished, fully cataloged, completely understood machine that modern medicine sometimes implies it to be. Every single person in this video has shown us a gap, not a minor technical footnote, not a statistical oddity to be filed away, but a vast, humbling, breathtaking chasm between what we think we know and what is actually true. Jean Hilliard survived being frozen solid. Wim Hof consciously controlled his immune system. Angus Barbieri lived for over a year without food. A French civil servant functioned normally with almost no brain tissue. Kim Peek memorized 12,000 books without a corpus callosum. Phineas Gage survived a rod through his brain and walked up the stairs. Dean Karnazes ran 350 miles without sleeping. Jean Calment smoked for nearly a century and lived to 122. Daniel Tammet sees mathematics as a living, breathing landscape of shapes and colors. None of them should have been possible. All of them happened. And if all of this happened, if the human body is capable of all of this, then the honest truth is that we are only beginning to understand what we are. Somewhere in the world right now, a person is doing something that will once again send every doctor, every scientist, and every researcher in the room rushing back to their textbooks, and they will find no answer there, because some things about the human body are still beautifully and profoundly beyond explanation.